But there's a message underneath the Christmas part of that song that resonates so deeply with truth, that I'm emotional today. It just really says that reality is so beautiful, and when we're in circumstances where we have nothing else to lean on but one another as a community, there's a beautiful truth that can come from that's so welcoming. And I don't know about you, but I have people that are in those circumstances, and this is a time for us to really recognize that at any moment, any of us can be in a situation like that. And that's what I think I love about Christmas and that type of song, is that it just brings us home to ourselves and a deeper sense of gratitude for all the things that we have. One of the things that I do with Luke at night now is I have him say, "I am who I am, and that is enough." And he says that 3 times, and it sounds something like, I'm enough. And then we go through the gratitudes, and sometimes when I'm tired and I'm starting to fall asleep, he'll go, "I'm so grateful for my church and for all Dr. Aaron," and he goes through Diane, I start to realize what an influence community has on his little heart, and I'm so grateful. And then it brings my gratitude up to have such a wonderful community that my beautiful children get to be blessed in. And so the good news for our family is Luke's adoption will be final on January 28th. And it's been a long journey, so I'm so happy that I get to share that with you. And I'm really excited and kind of afraid at the same time. But, Fish reminded me, and is that on the way up, she goes, "You know what I really admire about you is your spiritual journey has made you different kind of mom." And it's true. Although I still fall back on some of those old gestures, I know how to pull myself back into the present. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, I wanted to know if you heard about the conversation Jesus had with his disciples. So Jesus went to his disciples and he said, "Who do the people say I am?" And his disciple answered, "Well, some say you're John the Baptist returned from the dead. Others say Elijah, and some say another prophet." And Jesus answered, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter answered, "Thou art the Logos, existing in the Father as his rationality, and then by his active will, being generated in consideration of the various functions by which God is related to his creation. But only by the fact of Scripture speaks of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and each member of the Trinity being co-equal with each other, and each acting inseparably." And Jesus said, "Man, what? That's not who I am." He's like, no. And it reminded me of the talk that we're having today about what people say. And, the thought kept coming up into my mind is, what did Jesus ever do to us? Nothing. Jesus didn't do anything to us, but what the people said about him and what they inflicted upon, our consciousness and what we began to believe about him did, right? And it's something that happens with more than just Jesus. It's something that happens with symbolism and different things in our culture and our world. And we take on these beliefs and we, in this particular case, I think he kind of gets a bad rap because he was a radical. He wasn't even really said to be really super nice, actually, turning over tables and, standing up for what he believed in. And we learn that on the spiritual path, I don't know about you, but I chased down being nice for quite some time and just wanting to be nice. And spirituality and nice don't always go together. But being nice is more of a gesture of self. It's more of who we were cultivated to be. And we go through this period, depending on how you were raised. I was raised Catholic, so nice is definitely a part of my unconscious bias. And as I've revealed to you, many things are a part of my unconscious bias, as like yours. But one of the things that recently came up in the self-discovery and the nature of self, the small self, the little mind, of who we are and what we react to. And these patterns or habitual patterns, some positive, some said to be negative, depending on how you look at it and how it makes you suffer. And this is merely what this teacher, the great teacher Jesus, was pointing at as a radical. Was he was pointing you back to yourself and the way that you see the world. So on the way up, Fish and I were listening to Aja Shante, a spiritual teacher who is often referred to as Aja. And one of the things that he said is great spiritual teachings bring you back to the illusion of yourself and the gestures of yourself and what you consciously, but more importantly, unconsciously move through the world. What you like, what you don't like, what you like about other people and don't like about other people, and how we react. And so his advice to us during our search seeking, is to start to do an observation of ourself. That once we start the observation process, and the process itself cannot be forced. It's not something that, it is something that we take on as choice. But once we step onto the path of spirituality and we step into different teachings and they show up for us at the right time in the right moment, as they say, the teacher always shows up when the student is ready, that the one thing that it is always pointing to is our nature that we have cultivated through the of understanding of the gesture of self. I thought this was such a profound way to use words. The gesture of self meaning who Tracey is, how she moves through the world, that she's not always nice. Sometimes she's a little confused. Sometimes she has a lot of self-doubt. Sometimes she has a belief system that feels like she has to do it all or overwork or she has to save the show, right? And these things can make you very tired. So what I'm inviting you today to look at is your own gestures of self. How do you move through the world? How do you react? And how do you start to look at those so that you can have a new sense of freedom? The illusion, the ego's false sense of control and separation, is something that we must take time to look at, dig into, and start to allow itself to be revealed to us. And in that journey of self-observation, typically, most teachers say the best and most profound way to do that is through writing. One of the things that came to me recently, based on what we teach, is, what you believe, right? What you believe comes to fruition. Your world is what you believe, it's your reality. But it is more about what you believe about yourself. And we have the conscious awareness of what we believe about ourselves. I'm nice, I'm pretty, I'm not. We have these conscious thoughts all the time that are always waging war within ourselves. But we have the unconscious bias, those things that we are not particularly aware of, that have the conditioning of our minds that we go on autopilot for. So it's not so much about looking at the ones that you're aware of, although it's important. But if you're aware of it, then you can, in essence, make a choice to maybe take a different direction. But through the self-observation, what becomes available to us are those unconscious bias, that immediate reaction to challenges or things that we like, we don't like, we think we should be different. And if we start to look at when it arises, how the mind will immediately shift to make it okay, or it will worry about what it said or how it said it or who it said it to. And so the spiritual journey that Ernest Holmes was pointing to was this as well, right? Looking at the thinking patterns, looking at the reactive patterns, looking at the gestures of self and how we move through the world. And what becomes really clear to us is there's a seed, much like Diane read, there's a seed of light, a seed of love, a influence that is gently urging us forward on our path so that this can be revealed to us for a new awakening, a new dimension, a new shift in awareness and consciousness, not to be nice, but to recognize reality. One of the stories that he told in the YouTube video that I was listening to was that when he became a teacher on the spiritual scene, he was invited to a dinner with lots of spiritual folks. And what he noticed is that they were all talking and being nice to one another. And he wanted to know when the truth began. When do we start talking about the truth? And he found it very suffocating to be in a situation where these spiritual folks had gathered together and they were all being nice and doing the niceties, but they really weren't talking about reality and truth. And this so what he said he did, he got up and he went outside and he opened the doors and he took a nice big breath of fresh air and he goes, a dose of reality. Right? Because did you notice one of my practitioner students, one of her practices is to go out into the woods and sit. And so he talked about being in the stillness. And he goes, the stillness is an overused word, of course. We like our words in spirituality and we like to use them, make up things about them. And, I'm guilty about that as well because it's just part of our human nature. It's part of how our mind works. But one of the things that he says is the stillness itself is your invitation to self-observation and to notice the reality when the thinking mind calms. So he said a lot of his students will say, well, how do you calm the thinking mind? What's the secret? What's the recipe? And he kind of laughed and he goes, there is no recipe. It comes for you when it comes for you. The deepening questions come for you when they come for you. And when you proclaim your readiness through consistency, through honesty, through truth, through seeking out a teacher or a practitioner or a book, that this starts to take a hold of you and it doesn't let go. It invites you a new dimension of life where you start to look at yourself and you're really challenged by what you see. And this struck me in a way that when we come to a place like this to hear a teaching, that maybe we're coming here to feel good and to step away from the reality of our belief system, the way we've cultivated our life, and we're looking for some good news to make us feel good. But we're not always doing you justice if the only thing that we do is make you feel good. Because what is there to look at in feeling good? So I was telling Fish when I was driving over to pick her up today, I was supposed to bring the kids. We're kind of messing up a little bit. Can you hear me? Okay. When we were driving, the plan was for me to bring the kids up and, hang out with my friend and give Bill a break. And of course, everything goes crazy when you have kids and everything's Bill's fault. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you playing on the floor with her? She needs her diaper changed. I know, but I got to go. Come on, get her dressed, And I was getting very aggravated. This is a gesture of Tracey's self. She gets aggravated quite easily when things aren't going her way. And what I recognized as a teaching that has been really reinforced for me lately is gratitude, like with Luke. And I think, I'm so grateful about all the things that make me feel good. Having a house and having a good job and getting to do things that I love and all of these things. But I rarely have gratitude for the things that make me mad. For the people that find the vestiges of my personality that's still in there, that make me react. And I was driving over here and I had a whole new profound sense of being for my marriage and my husband, and that I was always looking for the gratitude when he behaved. But very rarely celebrated him for really showing me where my growing edge is. Right? The challenging, suffering times, we're always trying to push suffering away. And really, what Adyashanti says is, what if we drew it closer? What if we actually stopped and just felt what was going on instead of bypassing it? Conversation that, again, that Fish and I have when we drive together, we have big spiritual conversations. And we notice that sometimes when things are going wrong, I'm a verbal processor, so I want to talk about it. And sometimes when things are going wrong, car's not running right, or we make decisions, we make them okay, right? Oh, it's okay, my car's broken, I'll just take the bus. Or, we make everything okay, bypassing the actual feeling of what's going on. And that we don't really like to sit in our feelings. We don't really like to ask, what is this, right? Because one of the things that Audra said was, fear is an interesting thing for the mind, and that there's very rarely things to be afraid of. There are more psychological fears, and then there are physical fears. And when the physical fears come, we know how to handle those. Our body is dealt with the flight, fight, flee, run. But our psychological fears that go into our personal gestures of self really get a hold of us. And when we step onto the spiritual path, a lot of those unconscious fears come up. And we feel it as anxiety. We feel it as, people pushing our buttons. But in order to awaken to a new dimension, a new consciousness, a new sense of freedom, they must be looked at. And so he says, and I encourage, to be gentle with yourself. That there's nothing that we can do to force whatever it is that we're looking for. There's nothing that we can do to force another person to find their way onto a path. That we are only and merely responsible for ourselves. One of the things that he said was that strengthening your spiritual muscle by observing your patterns and conditioning, right? So he says that a profound practice is watching your patterns and conditioning without judging them, like a scientific observation. And that in this, you find these little nuggets, and once it's seen, it cannot be unseen. And that the pattern might come back up. But once you see it, then you can see the pattern, and then you can easily adjust. You can apologize if you need to. You can even apologize to yourself. And then what happens is the habitual pattern that has been unconsciously running your life has now seen the light of day. And that true awakening isn't about becoming something else, right? Like pushing those away. They're about actually bringing them in and looking at them as ways that we have become adaptive to our society or to get through life. Some of us have had really difficult circumstances coming up, and the ego develops these preservation strategies in many difficult aspects of the difficult times in our life and the suffering times of our life. So his idea is to spend time in the stillness, that if you are really serious, and only you know if you are, and if you're not, it's okay, because it'll come for you at some point. But if you're really serious, he says, be committed to your practice. Be self-forgiving. Pay attention to the feeling. And more importantly, when the reaction comes, just notice it. Just notice what and who irritates you. And then ask yourself, where did the pattern originate? Why am I still holding it close? Why do I still move in this direction, and how is it serving me? Am I willing to let it go? Am I willing to see that the person who is bringing this up in me has nothing to do with it? Now, it doesn't mean you have to go be best friends with everybody, because not everybody is meant to be best friends. But his thing too is we need personality of self. We need the gestures of self to navigate. But the most beautiful, profound thing he said is this journey starts as an individualized idea. I need to be better. I need to be closer to God. I want to be awake. I want to be realized. I want. But the thing that holds it into place is community. That what you begin to see is that the things you do for yourself ultimately show you the connection to everybody else. And that when you resolve these issues, you are basically a mirror for another. So it becomes a community effort. And then that thing that you were doing for yourself, you're now doing for others, so that they can see the beauty that you know about yourself through your direct experience. See, there's the things about belief, things that we take on, and what we believe ultimately has to be let go of. So he's not talking about a new concept, a new idea, a new way to meditate, a new way to pray, a new way to treat. He's talking about looking at all the things that you hold dear about your life that has created this bubble, and to pop it and to let it fall away gracefully. And there's nothing you can do to push it away. You can't fake it till you make it on this one. But what you can do is start to be committed to your own spiritual path, and to admit to yourself when you are ready. And when you are ready, something beautiful happens. Surrender happens all on its own. Surrender, you just let go. It's a letting go that happens. It's not, I read the book Surrender by Michael, and I went on this journey about trying to surrender. If you've ever tried to surrender, every reason that you're surrendering will come tenfold for you, and you're like, I just want to surrender. And what he's saying is, that is the mind. The minute you step on your path and you say, but how? Your mind has engaged again. So the pattern is watching the mind and how you can step into reality, smell that beautiful air, know that all is well, feel that all is well, and then the mind steps in and says, how? Oh, we're back in the loop again. So as we start to journal, we start to write, we start to look at our own suffering, what is revealed to us is a sense of freedom and knowingness, that seed that is within us. And then we allow the vestiges of our human nature, of our conditioning, of our upbringing, of the eons of habitualness of how we react. We allow it, we write about it, we see where it comes from, we let it go, and we step into a new dimension of consciousness, a new realization of life and beauty and reality. And you begin to know that you are the love of which you believe you are. And when you know it, you directly experience it, then you become it. And then you are magnetic in nature. And that, as a community, is where and what we want to be. So that energy is emitted out from this building, and it draws people in, because really what we want is to know who we truly are. And it is a beautiful and profound gift to give to yourself. And I will just leave you with commitment, consistency, and dedication in a slow-paced way that yourself guides you through. And I know, because I've seen it for myself, I can know it for you. And that's what we are here for in community. To me, that's what the holidays are a reflection of, is community, commitment, and love, and gathering, and being wherever someone is, and seeing them beyond the gestures of self, and knowing the truth so we can reflect it back. Namaste.